much for participating. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the National Environmental Education Foundation's National Public Lands Day webinar on volunteer leadership. We are so happy to have you here today for this conversation. As we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. If you'd like to participate in the webinar, we would love for you to just use that chat feature to comment. The chat moderator will be posting the links you see in the presentation into the chat. If you have a question, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll have a contact email shown at the end of the presentation if you think of questions later. Finally, you will receive a follow-up email with the resources mentioned in the webinar and a recording of the webinar itself. We would love for you to share among your circle to get everyone super excited about National Public Lands Day. So today is going to be divided into 4 sections. First, we'll talk about the basics of National Public Lands Day, giving you a deeper understanding of how you can harness this event to help your site do more. Then you'll hear about volunteer leadership cultivation, management, and engagement from our speakers with a conversational case study. Next, we'll explore NEAF's brand new resource, giving you a roadmap to start your volunteer leadership pipeline. And finally, we'll end with Q&A. Again, please put your questions using the Q&A function in Zoom versus the chat. I'd like to welcome our speakers today. You'll see them later, but here we have with us Emily Wilson, who's the Community Engagement Manager from the South Yuba River Citizens League, and Joe Wheelton, the Executive Director of Cottonwood Canyons Foundation. My name is Kelly Phillips, and I am the Program Director for Conversation at the National Environmental Education Foundation. You'll hear from me about our new resources, and I am your host for today. So to set the stage, let's talk about National Public Lands Day, what it is, how you join, and the ways to harness it at your site. First, you've heard the name National Environmental Education Foundation. You signed up for a NEAF webinar, but who is NEAF? So we're a nonprofit that creates opportunities for people to experience and learn about the environment in ways that improve their lives and the health of the planet. Now, our superpower is to build relationships with government agencies, companies, and other nonprofits to advance environmental literacy nationwide. So then why are you here with us today? It's because National Public Lands Day is a signature event of the National Environmental Education Foundation. When people connect to nature, when they make those relationships with the environment through service, through recreation, and beyond, it inspires them to make those choices that again improve their lives, but also improve the health of the planet. Hopefully you've heard of National Public Lands Day before, but if you haven't, National Public Lands Day, or NPLD, is one of the nation's largest single days of service for public lands. It's held annually on the 4th Saturday in September for over 30 years. That means this year it is September 26, 2026. Now every year NPLD brings together thousands of volunteers to help restore the country's public lands. Public lands, as you know, are special places that people use for outdoor recreation, education, and relaxation. They encompass national, state, county, city, and even nonprofit trails, parks, forests, lakes, really any land or water that is available for outdoor recreation. On NPLD, volunteers work with land managers to complete various service projects or to join in recreational programming. These projects and programs gives event participants an opportunity to learn more about public lands by experiencing the environmental and health benefits that they provide. In 2025, NPLD had more than 55,000 participants across all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico in more than 900 events. Now, we're able to calculate the value of volunteer service that was given to public lands in 2025 through NPLD. And as you can see, it exceeded $9 million. Now, these great metrics are generated by you. After NPLD site managers are emailed a survey, and that collects impact data and conservation metrics, so you can tie your impact of your project and your event to this national momentum. And that impact report can be shared with your partners, with your community, and with your leadership to show how, again, you joined the momentum of this day. Now, NPLD has changed over the years. It started with a single federal agency, 700 volunteers on a handful of service projects. And as you can see, we have far exceeded that 33 years later. Now, while most events still focus on volunteer service, such as planting trees, collecting trash, removing invasive species, there's actually been a growing trend to host events that recreationally connect people with nature. That could be a 5K, an interpretive program, a community picnic, or a hike. NPLD events are any event that engages people on public land. An event doesn't even need to be open to the public to be an NPLD event. If you had a scout troop, for example, that wanted a volunteer project for their troop at the end of September, that's NPLD. Finally, events can be done in a traditional group, or you can create independent opportunities like a citizen science BioBlitz. So that way people can do good work on their own. So the next two slides are photos from National Public Lands Day last year that really illustrate the variety of events that fall under the NPLD umbrella. As you can see, there were hikes, there were cultural events, there was a bike rodeo. Other things included astronomy and stargazing, there were story walks in partnership with libraries, there were scavenger hunts, birding lessons, and more. Of course, service is still very much at the heart of National Public Lands Day. So service projects included invasive species removal, planting, seed collection, restoring trails, especially off-highway vehicle trails for those public lands in the West. There was boardwalk building, historic building repair. I mean, as you can see, the sky's the limit with NPLD events. And we encourage you to not only see what service projects need to be done, but that how you can creatively engage your community on public lands. So another event planning feature to help you with NPLD is expanding eligibility from that fourth Saturday in September to any day, 2 weeks before or after the event. This adds flexibility if you're working with groups who prefer to volunteer on a weekday. Additionally, many states or federal land sites have other fee-free days. For example, Department of the Interior sites have Constitution Day on September 17th as a fee-free day. You can take advantage of those fee-free days. Or maybe there are a lot of community events going on in your area the fourth Saturday in September. Moving your event just a little bit could help with attendance or participation. And finally, not all areas have the perfect climate for outdoor work, even at the end of September. So if your event needs to take place a little later in the year for safety, that's okay too. Something we encourage you to consider is every year's NPLD theme. This year's theme is Caring for Our Shared America. Really, that theme emphasizes that what we share, we have to care for together. And as we observe America's 250th anniversary, we recognize that caring for spaces, yes, it strengthens the landscape, but it also strengthens the bond between us as stewards of our shared America. So America 250 is tied both thematically and logistically into NPLD this year, and I'll continue on that a few slides later. Something new this year is that NEAF has created a series of t-shirt designs, each representing a different story of what public lands means to people. These shirts are available for anyone to purchase, and the link can be found on our website. Each purchase supports the connective work of NEAF, bringing together people and the environment through education. There are a lot of different designs, a lot of great colors. We've already seen people sporting their NPLD shirts on public lands. So we hope that you and your team are able to join us in doing that this year. As the National Coordinator of NPLD, we want to support you in your great work to connect people with nature. And we do this through event coordination resources, skill building webinars, managing the interactive map of events, as well as publishing a national impact report. Now, our major tool to support you is the Site Manager's Guide. Whether this is your first time leading National Public Lands Day or you're a seasoned event planner, this guide has articles, webinars, toolkits, and worksheets to help you with everything with your event, from planning to promoting and execution. Now, every year we have new resources. We recently published a guide on risk management for outdoor events and a resource on how tracking metrics can tell the story of your event's success. Other resources include budget guidance, planning timelines, recruitment strategies, and more. So even if you've seen this guide before, it's worth a visit again. Now, one of our most used resources is the promotional toolkit. Language on how to describe National Public Lands Day is in this kit. That means you can use it for newsletters, for emails. It's great to have that in talking about NPLD to your partners, to your leadership. Also in this toolkit are logos, release templates. We have social media graphics with pre-written content for easy posting. This promotional toolkit is a marketing department's dream. And if you don't have a marketing department, this promotional toolkit will help you essentially become one for NPLD. So once you have a National Public Lands Day event, the next step is to register it with NEAF. That is how you participate in the momentum of the day. Here's some benefits. First, your event is added to our interactive national map. That map gets significant traffic for people looking for volunteer events in their area. Additionally, your event is added to the national impact numbers, again, showing that you are part of this momentum. We encourage photos to be used when you're putting in your event listing, so that way your event could be featured on our social platforms, in public presentations, or even press releases. Finally, registering your event is how to request fee-free coupons. Fee-free coupons are only available for events on federally managed land. So to register your event with NEAF, you can create an account or log into your previous account. There are easy step-by-step instructions. You enter your event information, and then your event listing is live. Your listing is its own separate landing page found on NEAF's interactive map. So as I said earlier, NEAF is not only thematically tied to America 250, but also logistically. NEAF is a founding partner of America 250, and NPLD is registered with America Gives, which is their big volunteer campaign. So anything related to NPLD, NEAF will report that to America 250. We'll compile and submit the hours, we'll have the event coverage on their map, so that way, when you register your event with NEAF, we are going to do the reporting for you for America 250. So in this next part of the webinar, we will hear from two community engagement experts about turning volunteers into leaders. Emily, if you'd like to come on camera now. So first we have Emily Wilson, who began her career in a combination of choreography and human resources, funneling the wild, creative energy of humans into a well-organized project. In the last decade, she has built thriving volunteer teams for arts, senior services, and environmental nonprofits, aiming to match each volunteer role that lets their talents shine. Emily's best days start with her team feeling prepared and supported, and end with them feeling proud and connected. Thank you so very much for joining us, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me. As you said, I am with the South Yuba River Citizens League, and it's just so exciting for me just to see all of your names out there, because I'm a little bit of a one-person team here, and to know that there are so many folks out there doing what I'm doing is it's good for my heart. We're going to talk for a few minutes about how Circle has, over the last 40 years, developed our volunteer leaders, because our Yuba River cleanup is it's pretty extensive. We hit about 25, 26 sites per year, and each of them has between 6 and 100 volunteers. So and as a nonprofit, we don't have staff to supervise all of those. So in order to meet those goals of our mission, we do need to recruit, develop, support, and retain really high quality volunteer leaders. So if we look at the next slide, we'll talk about some of the first steps in doing that. The first step, of course, is to ask yourself, why should I do this? Why should I start developing this volunteer leadership bench? And the obvious answer is more locations, right? Getting more done than you might be able to cover with yourself or your staff, supervising. The next is more engagement. People who are in leadership roles as volunteers tend to be more invested in your organization. They're going to be advocates for your organization when they're out in public, when they're connecting with people socially. They may become members and supporters, so that engagement is essential. And then more empowerment for those people. When people have volunteered for you for a while, they develop skills, they develop relationships, they develop a working knowledge of how some of your projects run. And they start itching, and some of them start itching to contribute more of themselves, to contribute more of their abilities, and they can feel less satisfied. Some feel less satisfied as an individual contributor, and they do want a little bit of a leadership position. So that is going to make people feel proud and also keep them engaged in your volunteer program. And the last point is it provides more guidance for your general volunteer pool. So if my river cleanup has 600 volunteers, many of them this is their first experience with Circle. And the fact that they show up and there is a trained, capable, and enthusiastic volunteer leader there as their resource, as their support, as their trainer, as their emergency responder, that creates better experiences for everyone. My core belief is that one of the most important pieces of volunteer retention is that they know how to do a good job and they are empowered to do a good job. When volunteers have an experience where they show up, there's insufficient guidance, there's insufficient information, maybe there's insufficient communication, they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, they go home thinking, that didn't feel great, and that's not the place for me. So by putting these volunteer leaders in place, you not only further engage the volunteer leaders, but you create an experience for all your volunteers that makes them want to come back to you when they have a choice about where to volunteer. Let's look at the next slide, which tells us a little bit about why we might not want to do this process. This is a big time investment, and I don't know how much budget, how much time, how much help you have, but it takes time, especially the first year, when you are looking for people, you're kind of scouring your volunteers, you're scouring the community, you're interviewing people, you're training people for the first time. It takes a lot of your time. And if you don't have it, sometimes you just have to be realistic. Like, until I have more help, I'm not going to be able to develop a team, and we may not be able to expand. And it's okay to say no to growth if it's too soon, if you don't have the time to support it. So be ready for the first year to be a pretty big investment that may not pay off really in time until the second year. The second piece that you may want to consider is that once the word gets out that you are looking for volunteer leaders, people will start contacting you and saying, I would like to do that. I'm great at that. I love taking charge of stuff. And you'll interview them and consider them, and you will have to say no to some. So if you are a person who is not comfortable saying no, this may not be a good option for you, because you have to be able to say, okay, that person is better as an individual volunteer, and I am going to encourage them to do a piece individually that I think is a perfect fit for their skills, and that it is no more or less important than being a leader but it is the right one for them. And if you can tell people that, make sure you do not put people in a leader position who are going to be more trouble than they're worth. Let's look at the next slide. So when I start looking, and I'm always looking throughout the year as we have our events, I'm looking at our current volunteers first and our past volunteers. Sometimes I will pull a roster of past volunteers and I'll look for names of people I remember. I'll think, oh, okay, that person was at the film festival and I remember there was a snowstorm and she shoveled herself out all the way down to the end of her driveway in order to make it to her shift. She is dedicated. Or this person showed up for the cleanup last year and dealt with a really challenging surprise interaction, maybe with some unhoused folks, and held dear to our processes in that moment, really made good choices. That is a good leader. So I start going through who I know and figure out how did they perform at past events and what might make them a good volunteer leader. Professional experience. I'm hoping that you guys get opportunities regularly to talk to your volunteers at events, after events, at parties, maybe on the phone sometimes when you guys just talk about what's coming up. And you start to know what they used to do professionally. A lot of my volunteers are retired, and a lot of them came in with professional experience that absolutely applies, whether that is as a tradesperson, as an administrator, in marketing. Many of them have skills on deck, ready to use, that we can definitely engage for this. People who have a passion for the cause. You know the people that I'm talking about, people on your volunteer team who care so much. They walk the walk in their personal life. They talk the talk everywhere they go in public. People who are passionate are people who you can count on to be there, to show up for training, and to give it all they have. I also look for people with problem-solving skills because no matter how thoroughly you train your volunteer managers, there will be unexpected things that come up. Oh my gosh, the dumpster didn't get delivered here. It got delivered to a site 3 miles down the road. How are they going to manage, right? How are they going to address that problem? Have I seen them problem solve before in a way that balances the plan with the reality that we're dealing with at this moment? And then policy followers. One of you mentioned in your questions as you registered about people going rogue. You do have to watch out for this. As people become the people who are confident, the people who are good problem solvers, who think fast, that is an important skill. But sometimes it comes with a little bit of disregard for the plan. And so you're looking for people who will respect the policies, will respect your safety limitations, your insurance limitations, your liability limitations, your time limitations. There are things that have to be pretty strictly adhered to, and you have to trust those people to do what is right, not just for that moment, but for your organization as a whole. So you're balancing problem solving with also a willingness to comply with your existing rules. Let's look at the next slide. So after we have kind of culled everybody we can, sort of drawn from the pool that is our existing volunteers, we now can look at the larger community for people who may not be volunteers with us yet, but who are probably well suited to the job. Friends and family of people who you've already had as volunteer leaders, if they come recommended, they're probably a good person. And they're a good person also to put as a teammate, like a co-lead with their friend or their family member so that they can learn from someone they trust. Business owners and managers, if you have businesses in town who you know have as part of their mission a commitment to the community, they might want to be involved in your event. And whoever is managing the people at that business is already a manager. So they know how to direct a team, and they may even come with their entire own team. So here's our 10, employees, and here's me ready to be their leader. And so you've got a whole team that comes prepackaged. Same thing with nonprofit leaders. Faith community leaders, if you have people in your faith community they often have somebody who is already in this photo I have here in the thing, that is the pastor taking their picture, somebody who already is in a leadership role with that group and can help organize. Teachers are perfect for this. They have all the skills. Scout leaders, very similar, and they will bring their own scouts. And service community leaders, that's your Elks Club, your Rotary, things like that. Reach out to them soon, and see if they want to be involved, not only to send their participants as volunteers, but to bring themselves as a leader. Let's look at the next one. I mentioned briefly about teaming people up, and I cannot overstate the value of this. When you are asking somebody to be a leader, some people leap right in. They're like, yes, I can do anything. But a lot of people will say, like, oh gosh, I don't know. What if something goes wrong? What if I don't do it right? What if I don't remember all the rules? Putting them with a buddy doesn't cost you much, and it brings so much more safety, fun, security, and a better experience to your volunteer leaders. So I love co-site leaders. See if you can create them wherever you have the resources. That creates backup if one of them gets ill and has to cancel. It provides training. So if you have an experienced leader and you're bringing in someone who is very green, you can put them together, and the event itself becomes a training opportunity. Better emergency response options. I send people way out into the boonies, and it is good to have one site leader who can stay with an injured person and one who can go get help. And then a higher return rate for your volunteer leaders. They just have more fun when they are working with a teammate, and many of them now consider it like their team and their team's site, and they want to come back and do it every year. Let's see at the next slide. When should you recruit them? I think you know that answer. It's right now. Nobody likes to be called at the last minute. They want to feel like they were thought about well in advance, and you chose them. Let's look at the next slide. How? This depends on what resources you have, I know, but if you possibly can spare the time, call them. This has a few benefits, well over like a mass email, like, hey, everybody, who wants to be a leader? It doesn't necessarily create as much interest or as much engagement as calling somebody and saying, hi, Jan, I know that you were a teacher for 35 years, and I know that you're a volunteer with us and you've worked at this cleanup before. May I consider putting you in as a co-captain or a captain of a site? So that personal invitation also gives you the invitation opportunity to tell them why you think they're great for this. What about their professional background, their interpersonal style, their performance at past volunteer events? Why do you think that they are perfect for this? You don't just need a warm body. You need something they have to offer that not everybody has. That usually hooks people in. And then you're on the phone with them so you can address concerns. If they get an email and they have a concern, they will just not open it or not respond. If they're on the phone with you and they think like, well, I get really hot and I don't like to be in that place, I can say, I will absolutely find you a site that is shaded. So you can address concerns in that moment if you are in a conversation with them. And next slide. Okay, what they need. Many of you in your pre-event questions or goals talked about retention and appreciation. And I am all for saying thank you. But what people most need, I think, in order to feel appreciated is that you respect their time and their skills and what they have to offer by really preparing them, really setting them up for success. So we begin with a variety of learning styles and we give them as much information as we can. I put written instructions into an email so that people very early on, months in advance, start to get a sense of what their responsibilities will be. I create a slideshow or a video. I don't know if you all have noticed, but very few people read anymore. So a picture and a video, if you have time to make it, brilliant. Even just a little Canvas slideshow, easy peasy and worth the effort. I do host an in-person training. A lot of these people who I love because of their interpersonal style learn best in an interpersonal setting, and so we do a training here in the office. Bring as many of the site captains in as we can. They can ask questions. They can learn from each other, and they can build community that way. Email quizzes with prizes. If there are some facts about safety or about supplies or anything that you don't want people to forget, a lot of people love a quiz, and it's especially fun if you do a multiple choice quiz and at least one of your multiple choice answers is ridiculously wrong. That just tickles people and they will do your quizzes. I do a printable quick reference guide with contacts, especially emergency contacts and land manager contacts, because I send people into places where there is absolutely no service. And then be reachable if possible. So if they are able to get to a place with service and they need help or guidance, it's good to have, I have my phone on, I'm available. If there's a serious emergency, I can help respond. Next slide. And will they come back? And as I said, the primary factor in whether people come back is, did they have a good time? Did they feel like the event was well organized? Did they feel well prepared? Did they feel competent? If you set them up so that they end up making mistakes and then somebody's mad at them, they have the kind of experience they might not want to come back to. So really, retention is often about preparation. And then we also thank them publicly and specifically. This person made this thing happen by doing this thing. And whether they want it to be public or not, you'll get a feel for each person. It might just be about a private email or call to them saying, hey, I really appreciate it. I also noticed that you stayed an extra hour and a half because that was 3 truckloads of trash that you guys removed. And I really appreciate you putting in that extra effort. Survey for improvements. As soon as you can after the event, send out a survey. You can do this easily on Microsoft documents. And easy, short survey. Don't make it a project for them, but they will know that you care about what they noticed and what they think might work better. And then very shortly after you have assessed those survey responses and identified changes you'd like to make, send those back to your site captains to say, based on the feedback you guys presented, I've decided to make these changes for next year. What you observe and what you know in your brains are absolutely valued here. And that will help them feel like, yes, they're not just looking for a warm body. They need me. They need my brains and my experience. And I am proud to be a part of this, and I will absolutely be there next year. And in that moment, you ask them about next year. Obviously, not everybody can schedule things a year out, but you can say, you did a beautiful job with this. I would love to have you next year. May I call you in July? May I, and see if you're available again to be a leader. And at that moment, when they have just had that big success, plus they've heard from you how valuable their work was, you are likely going to get at least a tentative commitment. And that's it. So, I'm happy to take questions during the question period, and I hope that this helps a little.
Thank you so much, Emily, for sharing your experiences, your insights, working with hundreds to thousands of volunteers every year. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Joe Wilton. Joe, if you want to come off mute. Joe is the executive director of the Cottonwood Canyons Foundation. The Cottonwood Canyons Foundation supports Cottonwood Canyons through stewardship and education. The canyons are located in the Uinta-Wasatch Cache National Forest, one of the most highly visited portions of National Forest in the nation. With over 20 years of experience as an attorney and executive, Jo melds her love of the outdoors and her administration experience. Working in the canyons allows her to follow her second dream as an avid nature lover and biologist. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jo. First, if you could share very briefly about Cottonwood Canyons Foundation and set the stage with your volunteer program.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm out here. We're lining a trail right now, so we're right in the thick of it. And I just wanted to say thank you for hosting this event National Public Lands Day is a really big part of what we do here, and it's a really great way for people to engage in stewardship. So we're really excited to be a part of this. The Cottonwood Canyons Foundation was founded 30 years ago as a joint effort between the local municipality and the Forest Service, with the mission of trying to provide for watershed protection in this invaluable drinking water source that provides 60% of the drinking water to the Salt Lake Valley. So we manage 3 canyons, and we do trail stewardship, plant stewardship, and then watershed education. One of our events every year is the Wasatch Wildflower Festival, and that was sort of the volunteer engagement that I wanted to speak to you a little bit about.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. First, go ahead and tell us a little more about the Wildflower Festival and the volunteer opportunities that arise because of it.
Absolutely. So the Wildflower Festival is one of 6 major volunteer opportunities that we have every year. We host about 2,500 volunteer days. So we have about 700 volunteers that come out and volunteer for multiple days, and they provide about 10,000 volunteer hours throughout the year. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of the scale of what we're working with. The Wasatch Wildflower Festival has 150 dedicated volunteers that serve about 30 hours during the time that they're with us. The Wildflower Festival is an opportunity for us to celebrate the incredible diversity of wildflowers and native plants that we have in the alpine environment located at the top of Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons. And this is an exceptional environment. It's a prime location for this. And we have people that come from around the world to see this. Because of the tourism that this generates, about 40 years ago, the Wasatch Wildflower Festival was founded. And the idea is to train volunteers to go and lead guided tours through the meadows so that people can see the wildflowers, but do so in a way that least impacts the wildflower populations there. So that was the goal of the Wildflower Festival. We've been doing this as an organization for 30 years, and we now have about 7,000 participants that come out every year. We're right in the middle of it. It was last weekend, and then it's this weekend coming up.
So, why did you select certain tasks to be done by a volunteer independently rather than a staff member?
Absolutely. First of all, the answer to that is we're a small nonprofit. So we have 4 professionals that are year-round, and then all of the rest of our work is done either by seasonal employees or volunteers. The reality is that, as with many nonprofits, we've been volunteer run and volunteer led for a long time. And in fact, some of our original volunteers that started with us 30 years ago are still volunteering now. We didn't want to lose the community engagement that provides to people. We believe that stewards are created when they're engaging. And so we wanted to keep that level of volunteer. As we have grown as an organization, we still wanted to keep that level of volunteership up. In deciding what positions to give volunteers, there are obviously some fiduciary things that are required to be done by professional staff. But beyond that, we really have volunteers doing almost every capacity. We have volunteer guides, so they lead people out on a trail. There's 2 guides per 15 people. We have stationary guides that are interpretive naturalists that are trained for specific locations. We have registration guides that help get folks registered to participate in the event. And then we have people managers, and we have a lot of people managers, and that helps us to run a smooth event. All of those positions are available to folks every year. So we we recruit on a year-round basis for those.
So you mentioned training. What sort of training do you require, and how did you decide that type of training or that amount of training was the right fit?
Absolutely. I think it's helpful to look at this as a year-round process. So we start, first of all, 365 days a year, we have all of our volunteer positions listed on our website, and that gives people an idea of how they can engage. We start recruiting for the festival, which is in July. We start recruiting in March. We try to get them all signed up by April or May. At that point, we require them to do a few things, and then we have a lot of voluntary things that they can do. And that helps people, that helps us to meet people where they are. If they're really knowledgeable, maybe they don't need as much training, but we are making sure that all of our bases are covered with a few mandatory things. One of those is an orientation. So we try to do our orientations in person. If we're not able to do that, we do videotape them and offer them via Zoom. But we do try to capture everybody for the 150 people for the initial orientation. After that, we do 6 on-the-ground trainings where we take folks out, and we always, as Emily mentioned, we always use volunteers as trainers. So we're looking at those people who have been with us for a decade or more, and they can help train our new volunteers. We do buddy them up with people. We do allow them to lead a lot of the discussions so that it's not always coming from one voice. And that actually allows everybody to bring their a specific skill set to the table. We have geologists, we have biologists, we have social scientists, and everybody can bring their input to the table. So we have these 6 on-the-ground trainings that people are invited to attend. They must attend at least 2 of those. All new volunteers, specifically guides, have to do a practice section where they give a tour to one of our paid staff so that we can see how they're doing and give them a little bit of feedback. And then for the first year, we do offer them the opportunity to shadow. And so they can shadow through the entire experience and not have to do it on their own, or they can go out on their own if they feel really confident. This apprenticeship helps us grow really strong volunteers. Through the rest of the season, we do a big volunteer appreciation event after the event. We bring everybody back together about a month after we've done our surveys. We discuss things a little bit with them, and then we have volunteer engagement for the rest of the month. So on a monthly basis, we offer them an opportunity to come together as a group, and this really creates a really nice community for our people. So the training really happens, to answer your question, Kelly, on a year-round basis.
Okay, great. So that's a lot of volunteers over the course of just, a day, some days. How are they managed that day? Because that's a lot of moving parts, not only with the volunteer guides and the people wranglers and registration. Not all of them are in the same place. Some are out on the trail. So talk a little bit about day of management.
I echo Emily in saying that communication is key. And so we give them sort of job descriptions for each of those positions within the Wildflower Festival early on. And we talk to them about that on a weekly basis in an email, so they know what they're going to be doing throughout the training time. Day of, really, they kind of, the older ones, the more veteran volunteers kind of lead the other ones along. We do have a check-in at the beginning and a check-in at the end of the day. We have a 15-minute sort of on-the-ground orientation before the event. We provide them a quick breakfast. We provide them lunch. And during that time, we have a staff that's checking in with them. But because they have had their volunteer descriptions explained to them so many times in the prior weeks, they're really ready to go by the time they get to the event.
I can imagine so. So what does success look like with engaging an independent volunteer corps? And do you have any stories or examples that illustrate that?
Absolutely. I'm sure I echo all of your participants on this webinar, and that safety is our first priority. So getting people up onto the mountain and then back down the canyon at the end of the day safely is our first goal, and that is success for us. After that, it's sort of managing the expectations of our guests and making sure that they have an experience that they want to come back the next year. This year was a perfect example. Last weekend, we recorded the hottest day on record in Salt Lake City at 109 degrees. We held the event anyway, and we were able to mitigate some of the circumstances by having hydration stations, extra shade, and making the tours a little bit shorter. But planning in advance made sure that we were able to provide people with an experience where they wanted to come back. And that really is what success means to us.
That's fantastic. So my final question is, what advice would you give to somebody who is looking to start their own independent volunteering program?
Again, I think that the 365-day planning is a really good idea. Sitting down with a calendar and mapping it out, trying to engage folks early, growing that volunteer base from people who are in your smaller community, creating volunteer champions. So we have volunteers who are pretty much volunteer trainers that come along, and they can be, they're like pseudo staff with us, and they can act as almost in the level of a staff member as far as leadership goes. That's been very helpful for us.
Okay, well, thank you so much for going over this case study with us. You know, you've had a successful event last weekend. Best of luck for your event this weekend. I'm sure it's going to be a really wonderful experience for everyone involved.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
So thank you again to both of our speakers. As mentioned before, every year NEEF has a new resource to help you grow in your event planning skills. Whether those are in PLD events or really any program you hold, as we've heard a couple of different examples from our speakers. So to go along with the expertise shared here today, NEEF has just released a new guide to help you put what you learned into action. So in these next minute or two, I'm going to go over a few milestones in the roadmap that you'll discover in this brand new guide that we've created. So really, you know, as you've heard, it very much starts with building a framework. What needs does your organization have that personnel other than a staff person could handle? So some common tasks for volunteers are, you know, data entry, mailings, answering phones, event support like setup, registration, handing out tools. And these roles can be completed under the direct supervision of a staff member. But those are also opportunities to look for leadership. So could there be a volunteer who manages other volunteers at the registration table? If one of the registration volunteers has a question, is there a more veteran person who can say, yeah, I can answer your question? That's not necessarily a staff person. So to fully assess your needs and build a framework for a volunteer pipeline, it's important to think bigger than what has to be done, but to consider how can you have an even greater impact if you as a staff member do not have to individually coordinate with each volunteer who joins your event. So a key element of onboarding is to provide wins. And that way your budding leaders develop confidence in their ability to step into this larger role within an organization. So a low stakes win, for example, could be co-leading, as both of our guest speakers said today. So perhaps being a co-lead with a more veteran volunteer. They complete the event, they feel really good about things they've learned. Another low stakes win could be a volunteer leading a game or a scavenger hunt for kids while adults volunteer nearby. They're given agency, but they themselves do not need to be supervised directly by a staff person. So it additionally provides you time for check-ins. So both of our speakers talked about consistently checking in with your volunteer leadership. This strengthens your relationship. It provides space for feedback for the volunteer, but it provides space for the volunteer to give feedback to you. Maybe your organization, could handle communication differently with volunteers, or perhaps there's a way to improve your event from a volunteer's perspective. Another great method of support is a peer network among volunteer leaders, getting them all together, because providing that space is allow them to connect with each other, build community, and create an opportunity for them to grow from each other's experiences. Leading peers is harder than showing up for an event. As both of our speakers, especially Emily, said, recognition validates the extra time in training and extra time at the event itself and the emotional component of being responsible for other people. Being seen as a leader helps others build confidence. So perhaps instead of volunteer, your volunteer leaders are given a title like team captain or lead. So being seen as that volunteer builds confidence, Also, it buffers against volunteer fatigue to be recognized. Recognized leaders stay longer. And recognition, of course, a very specific thank you if you have a large volunteer event is great. But perhaps there are other things too. Like there could be a physical perk, like perhaps volunteer leaders get a high visibility vest, they get a name tag. Perhaps that means that they get some information about your organization that is before everyone else learns, like changes to the volunteer structure, things like that. So consider volunteer recognition an investment in the future where, in addition to a reward for the present, volunteer leaders feel valued, and when they feel value, they want to inspire the same in others. So the resource link is in the chat. It will also be in the post email you'll get after the presentation. So all of NEAF resources can be found on our resources page on the website. Again, there is a lot more there than just this guide, so we absolutely encourage you to take some time, explore all the resources, and hopefully what you learned here today and all of our other resources will help you feel like you've really built your skills each year. So thank you for your time and attention. Now we are entering the Q&A section. Please put your questions using the Q&A feature. If we don't have an opportunity to answer your questions, there's an email on the screen. That same email is in your chat, and go ahead and shoot all of your questions there. Keep an eye out for the post-webinar email with a recording and links next week. We'd appreciate it if you share this within your circles and invite everybody to National Public Lands Day. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. If our speakers want to hop back on, we'll begin with Q&A.
Thanks, Kelly. We have our first question from Carmelo. They said, thanks for the great info. Joe, you mentioned finding volunteer champions that have leadership positions almost at the level of staff. How did those volunteers get to that level? Are those volunteers that have been with your organization for years?
We have people who have been with us, excuse me, for a long time, but we also have people for whom that was something that they did professionally, and that was really helpful for us. So we have teachers who were very easily fit into a role as an interpretive naturalist, and so they were able to become a leader pretty quickly. The majority of the cases are people that have volunteered for 3 or 4 years and then are natural leaders in that role.
Thank you very much, Joe. Other questions, Nicole?
That's it for now.
Okay, so Emily, you had, we'd looked together at some of the questions that y'all wrote for registration. So can you pull one of those and see if we, Joe, you and I can talk about it a little bit?
Absolutely. There are several here that I felt like were definitely worth conversation. And one person brought up the sort of balance between getting people enthusiastic to go for it and also stay safe. Joanna highlighted that safety is the most important piece. And the way that I have had some luck with that is by trying to level the field in terms of value of work. So because we have a history of pulling gigantic car parts out of the canyon, there are many people who are like, well, that's what you do, right? And I am too old or too injured to do that, and therefore I can't participate. Or if I do less than that, I will be seen as less than. And so what I try to do in every training, every conversation, one-on-one and as a group, is to change people's perception about the value of different intensities of work. So what I will say is, if you feel very safe and very excited and experienced in lifting heavy stuff, please go lift that heavy stuff. And if once you get your hands on it, you don't feel safe, you can always say no. It is absolutely optional till the very last moment. Even if you're carrying it and you're like, you know what, this is too much, you can still say no. And that is a fabulous skill, but also the person who can find 100 cigarette butts That is a skill that is so valuable given what we know about the toxicity of those materials, microplastics. Maybe we have some people who are capable of hiking really far, but they can't carry 25, 50 pounds back. So they are invited to hike really far and just gather what they can. We have people who want the hardest, craziest thing we can find. And I spend the time before the event, and I have some volunteer site assessors hunting down the hardest trash gathering situations. So what I try to think of is not levels of engagement, but just a fit for your skills and what you have to offer. And I think that makes people feel more like they are 100% going for it, and they're doing the safe thing for themselves. The other pieces that I like to talk to in terms of just like absolute no-goes, I am fortunate enough to have an HR person. You probably have something like that on your staff who you can say, you've seen our insurance policy. What should I tell people that we just never do? And that in some ways takes the pressure off the volunteers, because they don't have to make a decision about whether to do something really hazardous if we have already said, never, we just don't touch that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think?
I think this is a good opportunity as well when you have two people, like two co-leaders together, because they're very moderating forces with each other, just in making sure that all that energy and enthusiasm is pointed in a really productive direction and not necessarily an unsafe direction. Thoughts, Joe?
I echo both of those. Just this past weekend, there was a situation where safety was an issue, and we sent 2 volunteer leaders over to deal with it, because it's easier if you have another person standing there to give guidance than it is by yourself. And also, echoing Emily, we have a volunteer who's been with us for 30 years, and unfortunately, as we all do, he's starting to age. He cannot do the things that he used to do for us. So I'm helping him to naturally progress to another role. He has moved from being a guide to being the leader in our education tent. And he, this past weekend, he had such a great day. So it was really marvelous to find that important role that was something a little bit different than what he was used to doing, but also very meaningful.
All right.
I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, right. Thank you so very much for your time today. We are going to go ahead and wrap up. Again, if you have any questions, if you think of anything after the presentation, go ahead and just send an email to the npld@neefusa.org. The email was on the screen, also in the chat, and you'll receive it in the follow-up email. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. We hope you learned a lot and you're ready to look at the resource and start building your framework and assessing your needs to build your volunteer pipeline. So with that, I hope everyone has a great National Public Lands Day, and we will see you on the trail September 26, 2026.
Thanks so much, Kelly.